The flight attendant's voice was sharp, cold, and carried the kind of authority meant to remind people of their place. Passengers seated nearby turned their heads as the young woman, weary-eyed and dressed in faded jeans and a simple hoodie, was told that she had no business in first class. She had barely lowered herself into the leather seat when she was asked to leave. Whispers followed her like shadows as she clutched her small backpack, stood up slowly, and began the long walk toward economy, her head bowed to hide the sting in her eyes. She had endured tougher humiliations than this in her life, but somehow, this cut deep, because it reminded her that the world had already forgotten what she had given up for it. Before we dive deeper into this heart-wrenching story, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and honoring those who sacrifice for others, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Legends Off History. Your support helps us keep stories like this alive, stories that remind us of humanity, courage, and the power of respect. She settled into her cramped economy seat near the back of the plane, pressed against the window. The hum of the engines filled her ears, but inside, her thoughts drifted elsewhere, toward battles fought in places the rest of the world only heard about on the news, toward names etched forever into her memory, toward the weight of metals she kept in a box she never opened anymore. To everyone around her, she was just another passenger, maybe even a burden taking up space. But to those who truly knew her past, she had been something else, someone who had walked into fire, into storms of bullets, and brought others home alive. The flight dragged on, and she sat quietly unnoticed. At one point, as she reached to adjust the hoodie that had slipped slightly off her shoulder, the fabric lifted just enough to reveal the ink etched into her skin. A tattoo she had once sworn would remain private. A trident, a symbol few bore, a mark of honor, sacrifice, and belonging. It was the unmistakable tattoo of a Navy SEAL. And in that instant, everything changed. The pilot had stepped out of the cockpit, making his routine rounds, greeting first-class passengers and stretching his legs. He was a seasoned flyer, a man who had seen thousands of faces in his years of service. But when his eyes fell on her, when he caught a glimpse of the tattoo partially exposed on her back, his breath hitched. He froze in place, his hand tightening around the seat in front of him. Memories surged in, memories of a mission long ago, a night where he had been certain he would never make it out alive. A night when a SEAL team had pulled him from the wreckage of his downed helicopter and carried him to safety through hostile territory. She hadn't noticed his stare. She was lost in thought, her gaze fixed on the clouds outside. But the pilot couldn't look away. That tattoo wasn't just a symbol. It was a story, a brotherhood, a bond that ran deeper than blood. He remembered the face of the SEAL who had knelt beside him that night, whispering reassurance as chaos roared around them. He remembered the voice that had told him to hold on, to fight, to live. And now, against all odds, here was that same mark, inked into the skin of the woman quietly sitting in coach, forced out of first class like she was nothing. He stepped closer, his throat tight, his heart pounding in a way he hadn't felt in years. The other passengers barely noticed him as he stood by her seat, lowering himself just enough to be at her level. For a moment he simply stared, caught between disbelief and gratitude too vast for words. And when she finally turned to look at him, her tired eyes meeting his, he knew it was her. The one who had carried him when he could no longer walk. The one who had saved his life without ever asking for recognition. In that fragile silence, an entire story passed between them. She recognized him too, though he looked older now, grayer, changed by time. And yet she remembered his face from that night, his voice trembling as he tried to thank her, his tears as she placed him onto the evac chopper. She had never seen him again after that, until now. The pilot's chest swelled with emotion, but he composed himself. He straightened, cleared his throat, and then did something no one expected. He extended his hand to her gently, firmly, like a soldier saluting a comrade. Passengers nearby turned their heads, confused at first, until the truth began to unfold in the expressions on both of their faces. The flight attendant who had pushed her away earlier shifted uncomfortably, realizing the mistake. But it was too late. The story had already taken on a life of its own. The pilot's voice was steady but thick with feeling as he told her to follow him. She hesitated, unused to the spotlight, uncomfortable with eyes watching her every move. But there was no refusing the quiet authority in his request. Slowly she rose to her feet, clutching her backpack. As she walked with him down the aisle, Whispers spread faster than the hum of the engines. People craned their necks, wondering who she was, why the pilot treated her like a hero. When they reached first class, the pilot did what few had ever seen. He stood tall, looked at the passengers seated there, and with a clear, unwavering voice, he explained that the woman before them was no ordinary passenger. She was a warrior. She had carried burdens they could never imagine. She had saved lives, including his own. And then, without hesitation, he offered her his own seat, the captain's seat, the place of honor no one else could touch. For a moment, she wanted to refuse. She wanted to slip back into the shadows, to disappear, to avoid the attention. But the pilot's eyes pleaded with her, not for himself, but for the truth of who she was to finally be seen. And so reluctantly she nodded and accepted. As she sat down in that seat, a wave of silence washed over the cabin. It wasn't just respect, it was reverence. People who had looked past her moments ago now stared with wide eyes, realizing they had shared a plane with someone extraordinary. The rest of the flight passed in quiet awe. The attendants who had once dismissed her now approached with trembling hands, offering water, food, kindness they hadn't shown before. She accepted with grace, never bitter, never cruel. Her humility struck harder than any lecture could. By the time the plane touched down, many of the passengers carried more than luggage with them. They carried a story they would tell for the rest of their lives. A story about the forgotten hero who had been forced out of first class, until the truth was revealed in a single glimpse of ink on her back. And as she walked off the plane, head held high, the pilot stopped her one last time. He didn't say much, just 2 words spoken softly with all the weight of a man who owed his life to her. Thank you. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the quiet heroes walking among us every day, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Legends Off History. Your support helps us continue telling stories that deserve to be remembered. Special request to all viewers. Comment below with the words, "We will never forget," to honor unsung heroes everywhere.